Hey, Wide Awake family. If you see this, it's your sign to smash that like button. Yes, you listening right now. That way YouTube shows you more amazing stories like this one. We love you all. Now enjoy the stories. I still think about the start of that night because nothing in the beginning hinted at how messed up things were about to get. We met in a normal way, swiping, chatting, laughing at stupid jokes. She wasn't weird. She wasn't loud. She actually seemed nervous in a sweet way, the kind where someone avoids eye contact and fiddles with their sleeve. We decided to meet at a small cafe first, and if the vibe was good, she said she'd give me a lift home because she lived near my area anyway. The whole time she seemed distracted, not in a dramatic way, more like her mind kept drifting. I didn't think anything of it. People get nervous on dates. When we stepped out into the car park, she led me to this tiny black hatchback. It wasn't dirty or sketchy, just old. Older than she made it seem. She laughed awkwardly and said the car wasn't great, but it worked fine. We got in. That was mistake number one. The second the door shut, something felt wrong. Not dangerous, just off. The air inside was weirdly warm like it had been used recently. Not by her. By more than one person. The seats were too pulled forward. The mirrors were angled wrong for someone her height. But I ignored it. Because why would I overthink a mirror angle? She started driving out of the car park, slowly, like she was scared of messing up in front of me. She kept glancing in the rearview mirror, not at traffic, but at the back of the car. It looked like she was trying to catch something moving. A few minutes into the drive, she laughed awkwardly and said her boot was broken and sometimes opened by itself. She said it like it was a joke, expecting me to laugh too. I didn't. Because right after she said it, I heard it. A tap. A quick, sharp tap from the back of the car. I froze. She kept driving like nothing happened. Like she didn't even hear it. Then there was another tap. Louder. Then a scrape. Like someone shifting. My chest tightened. My hand hovered over the door handle even though we were moving. I asked her what that noise was. She shrugged too casually and said something might have rolled around in the boot. Except, the tapping didn't sound like an object rolling. It sounded intentional. Rhythmic. Human. I leaned forward pretending to fix my seatbelt just so I could see her face. She wasn't scared. She wasn't confused. She looked like she was waiting for something. Waiting for my reaction. We reached a quieter road near some houses and she slowed down. She said she needed to check something on her phone. But she wasn't checking her phone. She was checking the mirrors again, biting her lip, glancing at the boot like she was counting down to something. Before I could decide if I should get out and walk home, flashing blue lights filled the whole street. A police car pulled up behind us, siren off, but lights blazing. She whispered, "Oh no, not now," under her breath. Not in fear. In annoyance. Like they interrupted her. The officers walked up on both sides. One tapped the window. She rolled it down, trying to smile like everything was fine. He said they needed to speak to her because neighbors had reported a suspicious car circling the estate multiple times. That wasn't us, she said. She'd only been driving for 10 minutes, she said. But the officer wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the boot. Specifically at the way it kept shaking slightly. Another tap came from inside. Both officers heard it. I saw their eyes change instantly. The officer on my side stepped back and put his hand on his radio. The other one told her to switch off the engine. She panicked. Not innocent panic, but guilty panic. She tried to laugh it off again and said the boot is broken, that it rattles sometimes. But the tapping got louder like whoever was inside realized help had arrived. The officer ordered her out of the car. She stalled. He repeated it louder. She stepped out slowly, shooting me this irritated look like I ruined something for her. 2 more officers arrived out of nowhere and surrounded the car. One of them opened the boot. The second the latch moved, the lid shot upward. Inside the boot was a man, curled up with a camera strapped to his chest. A ring light taped inside the boot ceiling, and a mic clipped to his shirt. He had been recording the entire trip. From inside the boot. Recording me. Recording my reaction. The officer dragged him out, and he still held onto the camera like it was priceless. He started yelling that they ruined the take. Take. Take of what? That's when the police explained everything. She and the man in the boot ran a channel where they staged fake kidnappings with unsuspecting dates. They'd drive around, make the date nervous, film their reactions from the boot, and edit it into dramatic content. Caught being kidnapped. Escape gone wrong. My date tried to save me. Things like that. The tapping I heard. Him signaling when to start the scare moment. When to fake the boot popping open. When to make me panic on camera. She didn't look scared being caught. She looked embarrassed. Embarrassed that the shot was ruined. Embarrassed that the police arrived before the boot could fly open dramatically. The officers cuffed her while the man kept trying to explain his creative vision. He said all their content was staged, but they never told their participants. Never asked permission. Never stopped when someone freaked out. Real fear made the videos better. They were planning to upload me next. The officer asked if I was okay. I couldn't even speak. My mouth felt numb. My legs felt detached. She looked at me once while being walked to the police car. Not apologizing. Not guilty. Just annoyed. As if I'd ruined her upload schedule. That night, I kept hearing tapping in the dark even when the room was silent. Even when I knew the sound wasn't real. It's one thing to get used, lied to, messed with. It's another thing to realize someone wanted to turn your fear into entertainment. I still don't know why I agreed to go to his place so fast. It wasn't even a plan we discussed earlier in the week. We were supposed to just grab dinner, talk a bit, maybe take a walk if the weather wasn't horrible. But halfway through the meal, he said he had this wine tasting setup in his basement and that it would be fun to try a few bottles he'd been saving. I'd never done wine tasting before, and he didn't look threatening. He talked gently, dressed neat, kept the conversation steady. Nothing about him screamed danger. He wasn't twitchy or rude, just overly excited about wine. He kept saying how he'd been preparing this whole thing for ages. That his basement was the perfect vibe. That he added fairy lights and a small table. That he wanted someone to enjoy it with. I said, yeah, why not? I wish I'd trusted my instincts instead of my curiosity. We walked to his house. It was in a quiet neighborhood, not creepy quiet, just normal quiet. Houses all lined up, porch lights glowing, dogs barking behind fences. He opened the door and the inside didn't look messy or haunted. It looked normal, too normal, like he'd cleaned everything an hour before I arrived. He told me to take off my shoes and follow him downstairs. I hesitated for half a second, but he laughed in this soft way and said it wasn't a dungeon or anything. Just a basement. Just a fun little setup. So I followed him, down narrow stairs, into a room colder than it should have been. At first, I couldn't see anything clearly because the lights were dim. Then my eyes adjusted, and I stopped breathing. There weren't 2 chairs like a tasting setup. There were 6. 6 identical metal chairs arranged in a half circle facing a camera on a tripod. Not pointed at shelves. Not pointed at a table. Pointed at the chairs. Dead center. The fairy lights he mentioned were real, but they weren't hanging for decoration. They were pushed along the walls like someone tried to make the background look pretty on camera. I stepped back slowly. He didn't react. He just smiled, overly proud, like he expected me to be impressed. I asked what all the chairs were for. He said it was part of the theme, that he usually did this with friends. But he didn't blink when he said it. Didn't shift. Didn't sound casual. My eyes drifted further around the room. On the floor were thick cables. A ring light. Another camera hidden behind a stack of boxes. And on the table next to us, rope. Not old rope. Brand new rope still in packaging. I felt my stomach flip. My fingers went cold. His tone changed. Lower. Smoother. He said he was glad I came because he'd been waiting for the right person to start a new type of stream. Stream. Not tasting. Stream. My heart was punching inside my chest now. I told him I needed air because the basement felt stuffy. He nodded slowly. Too slowly. Like he was thinking. Calculating. Then he stepped between me and the stairs, pretending he was just grabbing a bottle from the rack. I moved back. He moved forward. My throat closed up. And that's when the loud banging started upstairs. So loud it echoed through the whole basement. He jumped at the sound. I froze. Then a voice called out, "Police." He panicked instantly. Not shocked, panicked. Like he'd been waiting for this moment and hoped it wouldn't come. The knocking got louder. He didn't move to answer. He didn't shout back. He just stood in the middle of the basement breathing fast. The police kept knocking, yelling they were responding to noise complaints. Something about loud music earlier. Something the neighbors kept reporting. I realized then he hadn't been expecting me. He'd been preparing something else earlier. Something loud enough that the neighbors heard. And now the police were here. I ran around him before he even reacted and sprinted up the stairs. The basement door wasn't locked, thank God. I flung it open so hard it hit the wall. 2 officers stood there. They saw my face and immediately pushed past me. He hadn't left the basement. He was standing frozen halfway up the stairs. 1 officer grabbed him. The other ran past him, scanning the basement fast with a flashlight. I heard them swear under their breath. They told me to stay back. I stood at the top of the stairs shaking, listening to the officers moving things around. 1 shouted that the setup wasn't for wine tasting. Another found something on a laptop nearby, some sort of streaming dashboard already open. The officer at the top looked at me and shook his head like he couldn't believe what he was about to explain. It wasn't a tasting night. It wasn't a hangout. The chairs, the cameras, the lighting. Everything was set up for a fake hostage live stream. The kind where someone pretends to be held captive for views and donations. Except he wasn't planning to fake it. He was planning to use real people. Real dates. Real reactions. He'd been testing equipment earlier and blasted loud music in the basement, enough for neighbors to complain. The police came to check on it. They didn't expect to find me. They didn't expect to find him. When they cuffed him, he didn't look scared. He looked disappointed. Like the show got interrupted right before filming. An officer guided me outside and told me I was extremely lucky. The neighbors might have saved my life without even knowing it. I walked home without feeling my legs. Every shadow on the street felt like those chairs staring back at me. 6 metal chairs. Facing the camera. Waiting. I should have clocked her weirdness earlier. Not the harmless kind of weirdness. Everyone has that. But the focused kind. The kind that looks like someone's waiting for a moment you don't know about yet. When we first sat down at the restaurant, it didn't bother me. She kept glancing at the entrance every few minutes, but I thought she was just the type who checks her surroundings a lot. The place wasn't dodgy or anything. Bright lights, lots of people, plates clattering, music playing low in the background. But she kept doing it. Glance. 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 Not subtle. Not discreet. Sharp turns of her head like she was tracking someone. When she talked to me, she'd zone out halfway through a sentence. When I talked, she barely heard me. Her eyes kept drifting to the door like she was waiting for a specific person to walk through. And the worst part, she acted like nothing was weird about it. Like all dates come with hourly door surveillance. The date had started normal. We ordered fries to share. She joked about how she always eats too fast. I thought she was just a bit jittery, a bit socially awkward. That's fine. I've been on worse. But then her energy shifted. She sat straighter, tapped her fingers, checked her phone screen at angles that looked coded. Her leg bounced like she was counting down to something. At one point, she leaned forward, lowered her voice, and told me there are bad people everywhere, even in places that look safe. I laughed awkwardly and said, "Yeah, true," but she didn't laugh back. Her eyes were fixed on the front door again like she was watching for an alarm. I tried to bring up something normal to diffuse the vibes. Music, the stupid movie trailers playing on the screens behind the bar, but she kept drifting off mid-conversation. Then she suddenly stopped bouncing her leg. Completely still. Like she'd spotted something. I followed her eyes, but the only thing I saw was some vibe walking in alone. Early 30s. Hoodie. Head down. Nothing dramatic, but the way she tensed made my stomach twist. She whispered under her breath, not to me but to herself. Something about timing. Something about finally. I asked if she was okay. She didn't answer. She just kept staring. The moment he stepped deeper into the restaurant, she gripped the edge of the table like she was ready to leap. Then everything exploded. 2 police officers rushed into the restaurant so fast that chairs scraped and people gasped. They didn't even look around to confirm who they needed. They headed straight toward us. The man in the hoodie froze when he saw them. Not like someone innocent who's confused. More like someone who knew exactly why they were there. Before he could step back, one officer tackled him to the floor right between the tables. Dishes rattled. A glass broke. Someone screamed. Another officer grabbed his arms and pinned them behind his back. Everyone in the restaurant was staring, forks midair, conversations dropped, phones out. But the weirdest part, she didn't look shocked. She didn't look scared. She looked annoyed. Annoyed like someone messed up her plan. The officers got the man up and cuffed, and while they were dragging him toward the entrance, one officer walked straight to our table. He asked her name. She gave it like she'd been rehearsing it. He sighed. A tired sigh. Then he said she needed to step outside for questioning. She stood up slowly, chin lifted, not shaking at all. I asked what was going on. The officer turned to me and told me I wasn't in trouble, but I needed to come too. Outside, the cold air hit so hard it made everything sharper. The man in the hoodie was shoved into a police car. Another officer was on the radio, calling something in. Then they explained it. All of it. She had been meeting random men for weeks, dates, coffee hangouts, park walks, always with the same behavior. Staring at doors, checking her phone, acting like she was tracking someone. But she wasn't scared. She wasn't hiding. She was setting traps. She was using her dates as bait. To lure out people she claimed were following her. People she insisted were dangerous. People she said she needed to expose. Except none of it was official. She wasn't working with police. She wasn't trained. She wasn't part of any organization. She was running rogue sting operations based on her own assumptions. Her own online theories. Her own paranoia dressed up as hero work. She'd been contacting actual criminals online through fake accounts. Sending them provocations. Luring them to public places. Then bringing random men, dates, into the situation so she'd have a witness if things got messy. Tonight, the guy in the hoodie was someone she baited for weeks. She told him to meet her here. She told him she'd be with someone. She told him to come say what he needed to say. She put me directly in the middle of things without telling me, without warning me, without caring if I got hurt. And the police only caught him tonight because he had been monitored long before she started playing detective. They rushed in early because they were tracking him, not because of her. Then they found her messages, her fake profiles, her attempts to lure multiple men, her lists, her notes, her steps, her plans. She wasn't helping. She wasn't trained. She wasn't authorized. She was creating chaos she couldn't control and dragging strangers like me into it. One officer pulled me aside and asked if I noticed her behavior. I told him everything. Every glance. Every whisper. Every time she checked the entrance like she was waiting for something. He nodded like he'd heard it all before. Because she'd done this 6 times. 6 dates. 6 men put into danger. And she never warned a single one of them. As they put her into the second police car, she didn't look at me. She glared at the officer like he ruined her night. Like she wasn't the one endangering everyone. I stood there freezing, watching the 2 police cars pull away. One carrying the man she lured, the other carrying her. They disappeared into the dark, leaving the restaurant lights glowing behind me. I've never had a date look at a doorway like it was part of a mission, ever again. I don't know why I agreed to a picnic that late in the evening. Maybe I was bored. Maybe I thought it would be cute. Maybe I just wanted something different from the usual boring coffee dates. Either way, when he suggested meeting at the big park near the lake around sunset, I said yeah without thinking too much. The weather was still warm, the sky looked nice, and the park wasn't empty, so it didn't feel risky at all. He showed up with a small picnic basket like he planned the whole thing carefully. Blanket, snacks, juice, stupid little fairy lights he tossed around like it was a festival. He was calm, funny in a quiet way, and didn't give off even the slightest creepy vibe. If anything, he felt too normal. We sat under a tree on this open patch of grass. Couples were scattered around the field, a few joggers, a family playing with their dog. Totally normal evening. The sun was dropping, but there was still enough light to feel safe. Everything was fine for the first hour. Talking, eating, laughing at dumb jokes. The kind of date where you think, okay, maybe this one might actually be normal. But then the sky got darker. Not pitch black, just enough to make shadows sharper. The park started emptying out slowly. People packed up their blankets and left one by one. The parents grabbed their kids. The joggers disappeared. You could hear crickets more clearly. The whole place felt quieter. That's when I noticed something. A rustle in the bushes a few meters behind him. Not a soft rustle. A heavy one. Like someone shifting their weight. I froze mid-sentence. He didn't even turn around. I stared into the gap between branches. At first, I thought it was an animal. A fox, maybe. But then something moved again, slow and controlled. Then I saw it. An outline. A person's silhouette crouched low, just enough to blend in with the branches. My chest tightened instantly. I whispered to him that someone was behind him. He barely reacted. He just said the park has weird noises at night and didn't bother turning around. I didn't buy it. The shape didn't move like an animal. It didn't dart. It didn't flinch. It stayed perfectly still, watching us. Then something else happened. A tiny blinking light appeared above us for a second. Barely visible. A faint flicker in the dark sky. I squinted upward and saw it. A drone. Hovering high enough that you might miss it if you were looking. Silent. Watching. My heart dropped. I told him again, louder this time, that someone was there. He finally turned, but instead of being shocked, he looked annoyed. Like I had just interrupted something. Before he could say anything, a loud voice echoed across the field. Police. Flashlights swept across the grass, moving fast. You could see beams bouncing from tree to tree. Then 3 officers ran toward us, shouting for everyone to stay where they were. My date jumped to his feet so quickly he almost kicked the picnic basket over. He started saying something under his breath, looking around like he didn't know which direction to run. 2 officers sprinted past us straight to the bushes. They grabbed the shadowed figure and dragged him out. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a random stranger. It was a man holding a controller, a drone controller, and he wasn't confused. He wasn't scared. He looked furious. One officer grabbed the drone out of the sky with a long pole attachment while another officer pinned the guy to the ground. He kept shouting that they were ruining the setup. Setup. Setup for what? My date started backing away. Not toward me. Away from me. Like he suddenly didn't want to be part of the scene at all. The officer nearest told me to stay still and asked who the guy behind the bushes was. I said I had no idea. The officer turned to my date. My date hesitated. Too long. Suspiciously long. Then the truth came out piece by piece. The police were responding to reports of an illegally flown drone in the park. Someone in the flats nearby saw it hovering low over people's heads and called it in. But when officers tracked its flight path, they noticed it circling the same spot for almost half an hour, our spot. The man in the bushes was controlling it. He had been recording me the whole time. Every move. Every expression. Every angle. But he wasn't alone. He wasn't random. He was working with my date. The officers found messages on his phone. Notes about the exact location we'd sit. Exact angle he wanted the drone pointed at. Exact moment I'd look the most natural. Turns out they weren't stalking me for fun. They weren't following me for crime either. They were making content. Not normal content. Not pranks. True victim reenactments. Videos where girls looked terrified, confused, vulnerable. Except none of the girls knew they were being filmed. They'd stage scenarios in parks, alleys, side streets. Make the date seem safe. Placed a cameraman in the bushes. Film the reactions for their channel. Post it as proof of danger so they'd get views. But they never asked permission. Never told anyone. Never stopped when people panicked. They wanted fear. Real fear. My date didn't react earlier because he already knew someone was there. He expected it. He planned it. He was waiting for the perfect moment to get that footage. The officers handcuffed both of them. My date didn't speak, didn't apologize, didn't act confused or guilty. He just kept staring at his friend in the bushes like the only thing bothering him was getting caught too early. The man with the drone yelled at me as they dragged him off, calling me dramatic for ruining his shot. The officers stayed with me until I left the park. They kept apologizing that it took this long to catch them. Apparently, they'd been doing this for months, posting videos of scared women in real danger. Women who had no idea they were being recorded. When I got home, I locked every window, even the tiny bathroom one. And for the next few days, every sound outside felt like a drone hovering. Every rustle felt like another cameraman in the bushes. What scares me the most isn't the drone. It's how normal he acted while someone filmed me like I wasn't a person at all. I knew something felt slightly off the second I stepped into her flat, but it wasn't the kind of feeling that makes you run. It was the kind that sits quietly in the back of your mind like a whisper you ignore because everything else looks normal. She wasn't weird on the date. She wasn't twitchy or clingy or intense. She was actually one of the most normal people I'd met from an app. We met for coffee near her place earlier in the evening. Nothing dramatic. She had a warm vibe, talked softly, and kept saying she preferred calm nights over going out. After we finished, she asked if I wanted to walk her home because she felt tired. I said yeah, thinking nothing of it. Her building wasn't dodgy. It was one of those recently renovated blocks with clean hallways, tiny lift doors, and fake plants no one waters. We walked up the stairs because the lift was slow. She chatted the whole way, opening up more than she did the cafe. Stuff about her work, her friends, how she hated cooking. When she opened her door, everything inside looked tidy. Not showroom tidy, just normal tidy. Blankets folded. Candles that actually looked used. Shoes by the door. Nothing that screamed danger. She asked if I wanted water, walked off to the kitchen, and told me to sit wherever. I wandered around slowly, not snooping, just looking. The living room looked lived in, pillows out of place, and a half-finished puzzle on the table. I walked toward the kitchen doorway, and that's when I saw them. On the kitchen counter, a pile of keys. Not one set. Not two. Multiple sets. All silver. All new. All labeled with tiny sticky notes. My heart skipped a beat. She saw me looking and laughed nervously. She said something about collecting old keys because she liked how they looked. But these weren't old. They were brand new. Fresh metal. Not a single scratch. And those labels weren't random. They were initials, spelled out like codes. I spotted one that looked uncomfortably close to mine. My first initial. My last initial. Same order. Same handwriting she used earlier when she wrote her Wi-Fi code for me. My heart dropped straight through my stomach. I patted my pocket. My keys were there. I pulled them out quickly and stared at them. Same shape, same size. But the metal looked duller, slightly older. I glanced back at the counter. Her labeled ones looked brighter, sharper, like someone just got them cut. She walked over casually, holding 2 glasses of water, smiling like nothing was happening. She placed them on the table and reached out like she was going to take my keys from my hand without even asking. My entire body tensed. I stepped back. She paused. Her smile flickered for half a second, like she hadn't expected me to notice anything. Then she laughed it off and said she was just going to put my keys on the shoe rack so I didn't lose them. My brain was screaming absolute alarm bells now. I slid my keys back into my pocket and said I was going to sit down. She didn't push it, but her eyes tracked exactly where I put them. Before I could figure out what to do next, someone knocked loudly on her door. Not a neighbor knock. A heavy knock. The kind that hits her chest through the floor. She froze. Her smile vanished instantly. Her eyes widened like she already knew who it was. Another knock. Louder. Then a voice. Police. My blood ran cold. She backed up and started shaking her head, whispering to herself. She wasn't scared for me. She wasn't confused. She was panicking for herself. The police knocked again, harder this time. She didn't move. So I did. I went to the door and opened it just enough to see them. Two officers stood there tense, one with his hand on his radio. They asked if I was okay. I said yes, confused, and they asked to come inside immediately. She tried to jump in front of them, saying they had the wrong address, but they pushed past her. One officer asked where the keys were. My stomach twisted. He had barely stepped into the flat. How did he know about the keys? Another officer saw the pile on the counter and swore under his breath. He pulled out a small evidence bag. She started crying instantly, not soft crying, but loud dramatic crying like she was performing. The officers ignored her. They turned to me and asked if she handled my keys. I told them she tried. They nodded like they expected that. Then they explained everything. Neighbors had tipped them off weeks ago about a woman in the building who kept bringing different men home and making excuses to take their keys, dropping them, offering to hold them, pretending to tidy them, asking to keep them safe in her kitchen while they talked. She would switch them with duplicates she had made earlier in the day. Then, when the guy left, she'd test the spare key later at night and see if it worked. If the man lived somewhere nice, high-end lock, clean landing, anything expensive inside, she and two other people would return later and rob the place. She didn't break in. She just used the keys. Her flat wasn't messy because she was tidy. It was messy because she didn't live there. It was a rotation spot used only for meeting dates. One officer asked me to check my pocket again. I pulled out my keys. He compared them to one of the labeled ones on the counter. Same brand. Same model. Same pattern. Her duplicate was brand new. Mine looked used. She had already made a copy. She was planning to test it tonight. When the officers cuffed her, she wasn't silent. She screamed at me saying I ruined everything, saying it wasn't fair, saying everyone does it and I should have minded my business. She kept yelling all the way down the hallway as they dragged her out. The officer walked me out of the flat and told me I'd been one of the lucky ones. Two other men from the building had their places broken into already. I didn't feel lucky. I felt sick. My legs were shaking on the stairs. She invited me into her flat so she could steal my life when I walk out the door. She smiled at me while planning to rob me later. She made copies before even knowing me properly. I don't think I'll ever leave my keys out of sight again. I still don't know why I didn't listen to my gut that night, because the first warning sign was right there in front of me, and I ignored it like it was nothing. He wasn't weird on the app. He wasn't creepy in person. He didn't say anything that made me uncomfortable. It was one of those dates that starts off almost boring in how normal it is, so normal that you don't even bother imagining anything bad happening. We met at a cheap pizza place near the high street. Bright lights, families everywhere, loud kids, a whole chaotic vibe. Safe. He showed up wearing some basic jacket, all smiley and nervous like he wasn't used to dates. He talked softly, asked normal questions, didn't overshare or push anything. For the first hour, the worst part of the night was how average everything felt. When we finished eating, we stepped outside into the cold. The street was busy enough that I didn't feel weird being out late. He asked if I wanted to walk a bit before heading home, and I said sure. I didn't read anything strange in his tone. It felt harmless. We started walking toward the station, but halfway there he stopped and said he knew a shortcut through one of the side alleys. He said it saved 5 minutes. I don't know why, but something in my stomach twisted a little bit when he pointed down that alley. It wasn't pitch black or anything, but it was narrow, quiet. One flickering lamp, brick walls on both sides, dumpsters pushed up against the walls, the classic spooky movie setting. I told him I didn't mind taking the main road. He laughed a little, almost embarrassed, and said he only suggested it because it was quicker. I felt dumb making a big deal out of a shortcut, so I just followed him. The second we stepped into the alley, the sound of the street behind us disappeared. It wasn't silent, but it felt boxed in, like the walls swallowed every echo. Our footsteps bounced weirdly. The air felt colder. Sketchy cats darted between bins. I wrapped my coat tighter around myself and kept close behind him. At first, everything seemed normal enough. He talked about his job, some story about college, random stuff like that. But he kept glancing over his shoulder at me, not in a protective way, More like he was checking my position, checking how close I was, checking if I was still following. I tried to shake it off. I tried to focus on the end of the alley coming up ahead, but then something moved in the corner of my eye, a shadow near one of the bins. I slowed down. It wasn't an animal. The shake was too tall, too still. Then a tiny flash lit up in the darkness. A camera flash. Not bright, but noticeable. Someone was taking photos. Of us. My heart dropped so hard I felt it in my stomach. I grabbed his sleeve slightly and whispered that someone was there. He turned his head casually, way too casually, and said I was just spooking myself. But I saw the outline of a person. I saw the camera glint. I saw the lens shift like they were adjusting focus. I pulled my phone out quick, pretending to check the time, but really it was already on the emergency call screen. He kept walking, ignoring everything, but his voice changed. It got tighter, quieter. The person in the shadows took another photo. Then another. A rapid click-click. I froze. My chest tightened instantly. I whispered that I wanted to go back. He didn't answer that. He just said, "We're almost through." Almost through what? The alley? Or something else? I stepped back, and he reached toward me like he wanted to keep me close, but the second he did, I called for help. I didn't scream. I just shouted loud enough for someone on the street to hear. The photographer in the shadows jerked back like he got caught. My shout echoed down the alley. At first nothing happened. Then everything happened at once. 2 police officers came sprinting for the end of the alley behind us, yelling for everyone to stay where they were. Another 2 officers appeared from the entrance we entered from, trapping all 3 of us inside. The guy I was on a date with didn't look shocked. He looked annoyed, like he'd been interrupted mid-task. One officer tackled the photographer to the ground. The camera clattered across the concrete. The flash went off as it hit the floor. Another officer grabbed the guy I was with. He didn't fight at all. He just stood there stiff, staring at me. I stepped back so fast I almost slipped. The officers split us apart immediately. One of them asked if I came willingly. Another asked if I knew the man taking photos. I shook my head for both. I couldn't even get proper words out. They searched the photographer's bag. What they pulled out didn't even feel real. Photos. Stacks of them. Printed copies of women walking alone. Printed shots of confused dates looking scared. Written notes with times, street names, angles. A binder full of staged victim scenes. One officer knelt beside the bag and held up a page. It had my description written down. My hair, my jacket, the street I walked on, the time I left the pizza place. The officer who cuffed the guy I arrived with turned to me and explained everything in this calm but disgusted tone. The man I was on a date with wasn't a random guy wanting a shortcut. He was part of a 2-person content scheme where they'd stage fake crime reenactments using real, unsuspecting women. It lured dates into alleyways or quiet streets. The second woman got scared. The photographer would take those natural fear shots. Then they'd upload them online as part of their awareness page. Except none of the women ever consented. None of them knew. They were using people's fear as content. They didn't care if someone panicked. They didn't care if someone ran. They wanted the raw reactions, the confusion. The moment the fear hits. They'd done this to multiple girls already. The police had been tracking them after the last girl filed a complaint saying she saw someone taking photos while she was walking with a date. Tonight, they caught them in the act. Because I shouted. Because I spotted the flash. Because the photographer wasn't careful enough. The guy I came with didn't look at me with guilt. He looked at me like he was disappointed I ruined their shot. They dragged both of them out of the alley in separate cars while the officers checked me over and walked me back to the main street. People kept staring at me like I'd been in some accident. When I finally got home, I deleted the app. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My mind kept replaying the flash in the dark. Not a warning. Not an accident. A camera sat on me. I swear this one felt like I stepped into someone else's glitch. If you told me this could actually happen before that night, I would have laughed, because it sounds too weird to be real. But everything played out right in front of me like some twisted magic trick with no magician, no show, just 2 people messing with reality for their own benefit. The date started normally. Too normally, actually. We agreed to meet at this casual sushi place in the middle of town. Bright lights, open kitchen, loud enough that you don't feel awkward, but not loud enough to make talking possible. She showed up exactly on time, wearing a simple beige coat, hair tied back in the neatest ponytail I've ever seen. She smiled like she already knew me, even though we'd only chatted for a few days on the app. She wasn't awkward. She wasn't strange. She had this calm vibe that made it really easy to talk to her. She asked about work, hobbies, random things, but not in a creepy dating way, just normal chat. Her voice was soft, her posture relaxed, and for a moment, I actually thought I got lucky for once. Halfway through dinner, her phone buzzed. She excused herself to take a quick call. She said she wouldn't be long. Totally normal. She stood up, smoothed her coat, gave me a small apologetic smile, and walked toward the front of the restaurant. I watched her step outside through the glass. She answered the call with her head tilted down, hair falling over one shoulder. Nothing suspicious. Nothing strange. I looked down at my food for maybe 10 seconds. When I looked up, she was sitting across from me again. Except, she wasn't wearing the same earrings. Her hair was tied slightly differently, and the coat she had on wasn't the same shade. But her face was identical. Her voice was identical. Her smile was identical. She sat down like she had never left. She picked up her chopsticks and asked me what we were talking about before. Not in a confused way, in a confident way, like she genuinely believed she'd been sitting there the whole time and I was the one who forgot. I stared at her so hard she tilted her head and asked if something was wrong. I glanced back at the front window. The real woman, the one I'd been talking to all night, was gone. This new one didn't look alarmed or out of place. She wasn't joking. She wasn't confused. She looked exactly like she belonged in that seat. Like she rehearsed this moment. My stomach twisted. I told her she just stepped outside. She blinked slowly and said she hadn't gone anywhere. She even laughed, like I was messing with her. I kept staring at the tiny details that didn't match. Her nails were painted a different color. Her mascara looked heavier. Her voice had the same tone, but the rhythm of her words was slightly off. But her face was the same. I don't mean similar. I mean identical. Same jawline. Same eyes. Same smile lines. That's when the panic really kicked in. My chest got tight. My hands went cold. I couldn't even pick up my water properly. I just kept staring between the window and her like my brain was glitching. Then, before I could say anything else, the front door of the restaurant flew open. 4 police officers walked in. Fast. Focused. Scanning the tables. The woman across from me stiffened. Not like she was scared for her safety, more like she'd been caught cheating in an exam. Her eyes dropped. Her hand twitched. Her posture changed completely. The police stopped at our booth. One pointed at her. Another pointed at the entrance. And guess who walked in behind them? The first woman. The original one. The one who'd stepped out to take a call. She had an officer holding her arm lightly. She wasn't on the phone anymore. She wasn't smiling. She looked furious. Furious like the plan had just fallen apart. Both women, same face, same voice, same everything, were staring at each other like mirrors with bad intentions. One officer looked at me and asked if I was on a date with either of them. I said yes to the first one. Then yes to the one sitting in front of me. Because at that point, I didn't know how else to answer. They told me to step aside. My legs barely worked. The officers cuffed both of them. Neither fought. Neither screamed. Neither denied anything. They just stared at each other with a silent anger that made my skin crawl, like one blamed the other for messing up what they'd been doing. An officer explained everything to me in the corner of the restaurant. Both women were involved in a 2-person identity theft scheme. They were twin sisters or extremely close lookalikes. Police were still figuring it out. They would target men and swap places mid-date. One would get personal information. The other would confirm details. They'd confuse the guy, steal his identity piece by piece, and use the shock of the switch to distract him. By the time he realized anything, both would be gone, and they'd already used his info for banking, accounts, whatever they needed. They'd done it to at least 7 men. Maybe more. The call was the swap signal. One leaves. The other enters. Everything seamless unless someone looks too closely, like I accidentally did. The officers escorted both of them out. Neither spoke. Neither looked ashamed. Just annoyed they'd been caught. I stood there frozen, staring at the table where two identical women had sat within minutes of each other, pretending to be the same person. I didn't finish my food. I didn't say goodbye. I just left, checking every reflection I passed in case I saw another duplicate walking behind me. I still don't know how I ended up in that garden, because the whole date had been so normal up until that point that nothing in my head warned me to run. It wasn't like one of those horror stories where the guy gives weird vibes straight away. He didn't. He was actually kind of shy, the type who looks at the pavement when he talks and smiles like he's scared to show too many teeth. We met at this tiny bakery near the bus stop. He chose it because he said he hated loud places and wanted somewhere calm. I didn't mind. It was bright, friendly, and busy enough that I felt safe. We talked for almost an hour, and honestly, he seemed totally chill. No dodgy questions. No odd topics. Just normal chat about food, childhood stuff, hobbies, whatever. When we finished eating, he asked if I wanted to see the garden behind his house. He said it was his favorite place, and that he goes there to clear his head. He described it like it was some secret quiet spot with fairy lights and a bench he painted himself. It sounded harmless. Cute even. And since his house was only a 5-minute walk from the bakery, I said sure. He lived at a narrow street with identical little houses all squeezed together. Nothing creepy. Nothing dark. Just normal suburb vibes. When we reached his house, he didn't even take me inside. He led me straight down the side path to the back, saying the garden entrance was separate. The gate was tall, painted green, and had one of those heavy metal latches that click loudly when you open them. He opened it, smiled, and told me to go through first. I walked in expecting some sweet little backyard with plants and lights. But the second I stepped through, the gate swung shut behind me with a mechanical clunk. Not a soft close. A lock. An actual automatic lock. I turned around immediately. He was still outside the gate, staring at me through the slits between the wood panels like this was completely normal. I asked him what that sound was, and he just said the gate locks by itself because it's old. He didn't open it again. He didn't even reach for it. That was when the first wave of panic hit me. The garden wasn't magical or peaceful. It was too empty, too clean, too staged. The grass looked unnaturally flat, like it had been pressed down. The bed she bragged about was sitting perfectly straight in the middle with no dust, no bird droppings, nothing. The fairy lights he mentioned were there, but they weren't plugged in. They were taped neatly along the fence like someone set them up only for decoration, not for use. There were no plants, no tools, no burning stuff. Nothing that suggested this was anyone's real garden. It felt like a set, a backdrop. He stepped inside after a moment, forcing a smile like he forgot how to act natural. I asked if the gate could open from the inside. He avoided the question and just started talking about the weather like he didn't hear me. I tried the handle. It wouldn't budge. Not even a little. My heart started pounding. I told him the gate was stuck, and he just nodded like that was normal. He said it jams sometimes, and we just needed to relax for a minute before trying again. His tone changed. Not loud. Not angry. Just too calm. Too controlled. I stepped backward. He stepped forward. The whole vibe flipped. That's when I saw them. In the far corner of the garden, behind the bench, a stack of equipment half covered with a tarp. I walked closer, pretending to just look around while my stomach twisted. Under the tarp were cameras. Not tiny ones. Big ones. Tripods, lighting rigs, a foldable reflector, a mic stand. This wasn't a garden. It was a filming space. I forced myself not to panic. I told him I needed some air and that the closed space was making me dizzy. He told me to sit down on the bench and breathe. His voice was too soft, too reassuring, like he wanted me to relax on purpose. I stepped away instead. He took another step toward me. Every alarm in my body was screaming at that point. I told him again the gate was jammed and I needed to leave. He said in this weird calm tone that we hadn't even started talking properly yet, that we needed more time. I reached into my bag and grabbed my phone. He froze when he saw it. His eyes flicked straight to the gate, then to the cameras behind the bench, then back to me. I didn't think. I didn't wait. I pressed the emergency call button. He lunged forward slightly but stopped the second he heard the voice prompt. I stepped all the way back to the fence, keeping my eyes on him while the call connected. I told the operator my location, that I felt trapped, that the gate was locked, and I didn't know what he was planning. He kept saying I was overreacting, that he just wanted to show me something cool. That I wasn't listening. But the calm in his voice was too practiced, too polished. He wasn't shocked. He wasn't confused. He wasn't defensive. He was caught. I heard sirens before I even ended the call. He backed away slowly, raising his hands like he didn't want trouble. But his eyes kept darting toward the tarp, like he didn't want anyone seeing what was under it. Police burst through the side gate of the neighbor's garden first, then climbed over the fence and forced the locked gate open from the outside. They grabbed him immediately. He didn't fight. He didn't even argue. He just kept saying we didn't get to finish the idea. When officers lifted the tarp, their faces changed instantly. Underneath were props. Hoods. Fake ropes. Zip ties. A duffel bag filled with stage blood, duct tape, and labeled folders. One officer pulled out a notebook filled with handwritten plans. Each page described fake abductions, fake panic reactions, fake rescue scenes, all filmed in gardens or alleys. His quiet garden wasn't for relaxing. It was a set for prank abduction videos he made with previous dates, ones he tricked into thinking something real was happening. Police told me neighbors had called earlier because they heard a girl screaming in that garden the week before. The guy always denied it, saying it was audio from a video. Most neighbors didn't believe him this time and reported suspicious activity. They weren't expecting to find me locked inside with him. I walked out with the officers, shaking so badly I could barely speak. He kept watching me as they put him in the police car, not angry, just disappointed, like he was upset the scene didn't go the way he wanted. I didn't sleep that night. My brain kept replaying the click of the gate, the equipment, his voice telling me to sit, the way he looked at the cameras. If I hadn't called when I did, I don't know what scene he was planning to film next. I swear this whole night still feels like something out of a fake documentary because there is no way a normal person would plan something this insane. And the worst part is that none of it even looked dangerous at first. No red flags. No weird behavior. Just a normal date that went sideways in the most unbelievable way possible. We met at a busy shopping area because it felt public and safe. She suggested grabbing bubble tea and walking around since the weather wasn't freezing for once. She showed up wearing this huge puffer jacket and acting all excited to finally meet in person. Nothing about her vibe felt off. She talked fast, laughed even faster, and kept pacing slightly while we stood in line. I thought she was just one of those energetic people who can't stand still. We talked about normal things. Hobbies, films, dumb stuff about school. She kept checking her phone every now and then, but loads of people do that. I didn't think it meant anything. She was friendly, funny, and way more talkative than me, but that isn't exactly illegal. After about an hour, she said she was tired of walking and asked if I wanted to come with her a few streets down so she could order an Uber to get home. I said yeah, sure, thinking she just needed company until her car arrived. We kept walking, and every time we passed a lamppost, she'd fix her hair or look into her phone camera like she was checking angles. Again, I just thought she was being dramatic for fun. She pulled out her phone and said she ordered the Uber, but the wait time was longer than usual. We stood on the corner of this quiet side street, and after 2 minutes, a black car rolled up and stopped right next to us. She immediately opened the back door and told me to hop in with her since she wanted to talk a bit longer before heading home. I hesitated and she said it was totally fine and that the driver didn't mind if I rode along for a short distance. She said she does it all the time. She sounded so casual about it that I actually believed her. I got in. Biggest mistake of the whole night. The driver didn't greet us, didn't show a profile, didn't have the little Uber card in the window, didn't say anything, not even a hello. He just looked at us in the mirror for a second and then started driving. At first, it didn't seem wrong. Some drivers don't talk. Some just want to focus on the road. But the more I paid attention, the more I realized he wasn't heading toward any main road. Instead, he drove around the same block, slowly, like he was waiting for something. He circled once, then twice, then a third time. I looked at her and she didn't seem scared at all. She kept glancing at me with this weird, excited expression, like she wanted to see my reaction. She told me in this weird, soft voice that something crazy always happens in her life and that I picked an interesting night to meet her. That sentence made my stomach drop. I asked her why the driver was circling. She brushed it off, saying the streets were confusing. But I knew this area. It wasn't confusing. It was literally a square. She kept checking her phone, angling it slightly toward her chest like she didn't want me to see the screen. Suddenly, the car stopped. Not gently. Hard, like someone slammed the brakes. The doors locked. The driver jumped out and slammed his door shut. No explanation. No warning. She didn't scream. She didn't panic. She smiled. That smile made my whole body freeze. Before I could even touch my handle, multiple police cars flew into the street from both ends. Lights flashing, engines loud, tires skidding. Officers jumped out and surrounded the car instantly. One of them pointed directly at the girl. Another yelled at the driver to lie on the ground. Everything happened so fast that I didn't even get time to breathe. 2 officers yanked my door open and pulled me out, telling me to step far away. I kept shouting that I didn't know what was going on. One officer told me to calm down while the others pinned the driver down and cuffed him. A few shouted at her to put her hands up. She whined dramatically like she was the victim here. Then the truth came out, and it was so ridiculous that it didn't even feel real. The officers said they'd been tracking her for weeks because she had a whole online channel dedicated to staging fake kidnapping videos. She'd arranged for someone to play the Uber driver, then she'd invite a random date or friend to get in the car with her. They'd circle the block to make the date look nervous. Then the driver would jump out and run, making it look like she was in danger. She filmed every single reaction, every scream, every moment of panic. She recorded the whole thing secretly on her front camera. Then she'd post the videos online with dramatic captions about how she escaped a kidnapping and trusted her instincts and felt unsafe but survived. She was building an entire profile off stage trauma. And I was supposed to be her next episode. One officer held her phone up and showed me the screen. It was recording the whole time. Even when she laughed with me earlier. Even when she said she enjoyed the date. Even when she told me to get into the car. She had a live stream open. Hundreds of people were watching, commenting, laughing, waiting to see what would happen. The police had been monitoring her channel for days because someone reported her for faking emergencies and wasting resources. But this was the first time they caught her in the act with a real innocent person involved. As they dragged her to the police car, she was still yelling at them about content rights and freedom to film. She wasn't scared. She wasn't sorry. She looked annoyed that the ending got ruined. The driver wasn't even an Uber driver. He was someone she paid to act out the scene. No license. No app. Just a guy who agreed to help her for cash. They let me go after questioning me for a bit. The officer told me if they'd arrived 2 minutes later, she would have posted the video claiming I fought to save her. They'd seen her do it before. The whole walk home, my head spun. A fake kidnapping. A stage ride. A live stream. Me almost becoming a prop in her twisted storyline. I deleted the app the second I got inside. My hands were shaking so much I nearly dropped my phone. I will never get into someone else's Uber again. I still think about how stupidly normal the start of that night felt. If you had shown me the first 10 minutes of the date, you'd swear nothing bad was coming. It wasn't dark. It wasn't isolated. Nothing screamed danger. It was just me walking toward a house a guy told me was his, thinking maybe this would finally be one of those dates that didn't make me regret downloading the app again. He was already outside when I arrived, leaning against the garden fence like he'd been waiting for ages. He waved, smiled, acted casual. He didn't look nervous or weird or off. Just a regular guy in a plain hoodie saying he was excited to hang out and that he wanted to cook something simple for dinner. I normally don't go to people's homes on a first date, but he lived close to my friend's area and I told myself it wasn't that deep. Plus, he kept saying he wasn't a big fan of loud places and preferred quiet settings. I thought that made sense. I like quiet too. The house looked perfect from the outside. Not fancy, not creepy, just a neat semi-detached with a perfectly trimmed hedge. He opened the door for me and said welcome like he'd been practicing it. I stepped inside and instantly felt something strange. Not fear, not danger. More like the air inside didn't feel lived in. It smelled like cleaning spray. Strong. Too strong. And not in a someone cleaned this morning way. More in a someone sprinted around 30 minutes ago, wiping every single surface until it shined away. He guided me to the living room. Everything looked spotless. Sofa perfectly straight. Cushions aligned like they were measured. Candles untouched. Not one fingerprint on anything. Not one thing out of place. It looked like a show home. Not a real home. I sat down slowly because I didn't want to mess up whatever perfect arrangement he had going on. He disappeared into the kitchen to check on the food he claimed he'd started earlier. I looked around while he wasn't in the room, trying to figure out why the place felt so strange. There were no personal items. No keys on hooks. No jackets by the door. No photos. No mail. Not even a random pair of shoes. The living room shelves were stocked with random decor pieces that didn't match each other. Fake plants. Random books arranged by color instead of interest. A big canvas painting still smelling like plastic, as if someone had just unwrapped it. I tried to shake it off. Maybe he just liked minimal stuff, or maybe he was super tidy. Some people are like that. He came back in and sat across from me, smiling like nothing was weird at all. He asked about my day, about work, about my hobbies. He wasn't creepy. He wasn't intense. He was just blandly normal. And somehow, that made the weirdness worse. At one point, he excused himself to get drinks, and I walked toward the window just to look outside and calm my nerves. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach twist. There was a laminated card stuck to the inside of the cupboard door near the window, one of those tiny house instruction cards with bullet points. I leaned closer. It said things like how to use the boiler, which bins to take out, and the Wi-Fi code in bold letters. At the bottom it said, "Welcome to your stay." My whole body went cold. This wasn't his place. This was an Airbnb. I stepped back fast. My heart was punching inside my chest. I didn't know what to do, so I sat back down before he returned so he wouldn't know I saw it. He came back holding 2 drinks, smiling like he hadn't just lied about owning the whole house. I tried to act normal, but everything felt wrong now. The untouched fridge. The empty fruit bowl. The pillows still creased from being placed, not used. The way he avoided pointing to anything that could reveal personal details. I forced myself to keep talking, but my brain was buzzing. Why was he here? Why bring me to a house that wasn't his? Did he actually know the owners? Did he sneak in? Did he rent it? Did he break in? About 20 minutes later, a loud knock at the front door so hard the whole frame shook. I jumped. He froze. Completely froze. His smile cracked instantly. Before he could even move, the knocking came again, faster, heavier. Then a man's voice called out, saying police conducting a welfare check. My throat dried out instantly. Why would the police be here? Why a welfare check? He stood up slowly and said he'd handle it. His voice was tight. Too tight. He looked like someone who'd just been caught stealing something. The police knocked again, louder this time, and shouted for someone to open up. He hesitated. Actually hesitated. That was enough for them to push harder. They shouted again. He panicked and stepped back instead of walking toward the door. 2 officers forced their way inside. He raised his hands immediately, shaking, mumbling something I couldn't hear. One officer rushed toward me and asked if I was okay while the other pinned him against the wall. He didn't fight. He just kept saying he didn't think it would go this far. While they held him, the officers started questioning him, and the truth came out fast. A neighbor across the street had read him break into the side door earlier that day. He had pried the lock with a tool and used the back entrance to get in. The neighbor assumed he was a burglar, but when he saw lights on later that evening, he thought maybe the owners came home. But then he saw me walk in with him and panicked, thinking I didn't know what I was walking into. He called the police and reported a possible hostage situation. The officers checked the back door. Broken lock. They checked the house. No luggage. No signs of tenancy. They asked him why we were here. He said he wanted to impress me. He didn't want to bring me to the house he actually lived in because it was too embarrassing. The officers didn't buy it. Not fully. They said he'd been flagged for similar incidents in the past, inviting girls to his place, which turned out not to be his place at all. Not all break-ins, but enough complaints that they recognized his name. When they escorted him out, he looked at me with this weird apologetic expression, like he wanted me to feel sorry for him. I just stared back, completely numb. The officers drove me home themselves because I was too shaken to walk anywhere. They kept saying the neighbor probably saved me from something I didn't even understand yet. When I got home, the whole night replayed in my head: a spotless house, the missing personal items, the laminated instructions. All of it. He didn't just lie about who he was. He lied about where we were. He brought me into a stranger's home like it was normal. It was supposed to be a simple walk after a quick drink, nothing deep, nothing weird. Just two people trying to see if they actually liked each other in real life. If I'd known how insane things were about to get, I would stayed home and watched some random series instead. But of course, at the time, everything looked normal enough that I didn't think twice. We met at this small street-side dessert place that stays open late. It wasn't anything special, just outdoor heaters, plastic chairs, and warm waffles that always taste way better than they look. She showed up in a hoodie and jeans, looking casual and chilled, not trying too hard. She talked fast, but not weird fast, just excited fast. She asked about my day, about uni, about what shows I was reading lately. Everything was normal. But even during the waffle part, she kept doing this small habit I didn't clock right away. She kept glancing behind me. Not every minute. More like every 10 or 15 seconds. Quick micro turns of her head. It wasn't obvious enough to look dramatic, but it was frequent enough that I started picking up on it by accident. I thought maybe the street was distracting her. Maybe she read someone she recognized. Still, something about the way her eyes flicked behind me didn't seem casual. It looked sharp, focused, like she was tracking something on purpose. When we were done eating, she suggested walking toward the riverside because the lights looked cool at night. I agreed because the night wasn't cold and I didn't want to end things awkwardly. We started walking down the pavement, and she kept herself slightly closer to the road, glancing behind us more and more. The first few times, I ignored it. The fourth time, I asked if she was okay. She said yeah. She just thought she saw someone she recognized. Her tone didn't match the words, though. It sounded too soft, too unsure. After that, every time we turned a corner, she slowed down for half a second and looked over her shoulder. Not in a paranoid way. In a planned way, like she was checking a specific position behind us. At that point, my brain started to wake up a bit. I kept trying to see what she was looking at, but there wasn't anything obvious. A few cars. Some people talking near a shop. Nothing suspicious. Nothing that matched the picture in her eyes. She walked closer to me like she was nervous about something. I thought maybe some old ex or someone she didn't want to bump into was around. Then she grabbed my wrist lightly. Not romantically. More like she wanted to keep me at a certain pace. She said we should turn down one of the quieter roads because it's faster. I don't know why I agreed. Probably because nothing about her looked dangerous. She looked anxious, but not unhinged. As we walked down the quieter street, she kept doing it, glancing behind me, then speeding up, then slowing down, almost like she was trying to time something. That's when I heard footsteps behind us. Not rushing, just steady, same pace as us. A chill crawled straight down my spine. I turned slightly and saw a guy in a black hoodie walking maybe 20 meters behind. At first glance, he looked like any random guy heading somewhere. But when I looked again, his eyes were fixed on us. Not wandering. Not casual. Directly on us. She saw me notice him and whispered that she thought he'd been following us since we left the dessert place. I felt my stomach twist. I kept walking, trying not to make it obvious, but now my brain was racing. I kept checking glass reflections and car windows. The guy behind us stayed the same distance every time. Not getting closer. Not getting further. Just matching us. She grabbed my arm again. Tight this time. Her breathing picked up. She whispered that she didn't know what to do. Before I could even react, everything exploded around us. Out of nowhere, 2 police officers sprinted from the side of the street and tackled the guy behind us to the ground so hard that he hit the pavement with a loud crack. Another officer ran in from a parked car and pinned the guy's arms behind his back. People on the street froze. Someone screamed. The guy yelled in pain as they cuffed him. I was stunned. My heart felt like it slammed into my ribs. I turned to her immediately, thinking she'd be relieved now that the follower was caught, but her face wasn't scared anymore. It wasn't relieved either. She looked irritated, not shocked, not grateful, just annoyed. That's when things got weird. She took a step back like she didn't want the officers to notice her too much. One of them came toward us, asking if we were okay and if we knew the man they just detained. I said no. She didn't say anything at first. She just stared at the ground, biting her lip like she was trying not to react. The officer looked between us, confused, then said something that made everything inside of my head flip upside down. He said they'd recognized the guy because he'd been hired several times in the past month to stage harassment incidents for online videos. Someone would pay him through private chats to follow them during dates, pretend to stalk them, pretend to make the date look unsafe, so the person could record a dramatic TikTok-style clip or get sympathy posts that made them look like a survivor. My mouth went dry. The officer said the pattern always involved a girl who would look jumpy on purpose, dragging the date along a route where cameras were set up or where reactions looked more dramatic. She'd never be the one harmed. She'd just use the footage afterward to boost some channel. She wouldn't even tell the date it was staged. She'd let them think it was real. She'd let them panic. Then cut the footage together to make herself look brave or unlucky or inspirational. Whatever got clicks. When the officer asked her if she knew the man, she finally spoke. Her voice cracked in this weird way that didn't sound scared. It sounded cornered. She said she didn't know him. The officer raised an eyebrow and asked why her route matched the same path the last two fake follower clips were filmed on. Her face drained of color. That was the first honest reaction she showed all night. The officer told her they had been monitoring her because neighbors reported she kept filming dramatic stalker encounters for content. None of them were real. She paid people to play the roles. The guy she hired tonight didn't know the police were tracking him for other things. I felt sick. Actually sick. She looked at me with this desperate look like she wanted me to defend her. I stepped back. They cuffed her carefully because she kept trying to explain that it wasn't dangerous, that it was just content, that she didn't mean to scare anyone. She tried to look innocent, but the officers ignored her completely. They read her rights while she stared at the ground like she knew everything was finished. As they put her into the car, the fake follower guy kept yelling that he didn't sign up to get tackled. The officers shut the door on him. I stood on the pavement, shaking, watching the police cars pull away. She never looked back once. I walked home feeling like I had just stepped out of someone else's scripted nightmare, and I kept replaying one thought over and over. She wasn't scared of the follower. She was scared the story wouldn't be dramatic enough. I didn't think the date would turn into anything serious. It was one of those random plans you agree to when you're bored and tired of being at home. We met on a dating app, chatted for a bit. Nothing deep, nothing weird. He seemed normal, quiet, polite, a bit awkward, but not in a creepy way. I picked a small burger place near the retail park because it was public, bright, and always full of families. It felt safe. He arrived first and waved when he saw me. Nothing about him screamed danger. He had this soft way of talking, and he kept thanking me for coming out because he had a long week. It felt harmless. We ordered food, chatted about music, Yumi stuff, dumb things. The kind of date where you go home thinking that maybe he's not your future husband, but he's definitely not a threat. For most of the night, he kept his phone on silent, face up on the table. I didn't think anything of it because a lot of people do that. But he kept glancing at it. Not checking messages. Not typing. Just glancing. Like he was waiting for something to happen. I ignored it because the vibe wasn't weird enough to make assumptions. Halfway through eating, he reached for his drink too fast and knocked his phone off the edge of the table. It hit the floor screen up, bright as anything. I bent down at the same time he did, but I saw the notification before he snatched the phone. It wasn't a normal message. It wasn't even a contact name. It was a group chat. The title at the top said pickup. Under that, one notification. Live location shared. Her dot updated. The icon showed a little moving circle. My stomach dropped so hard I felt dizzy. He grabbed the phone way too quickly and shoved it into his coat. He tried to laugh it off, acting like he just didn't want the screen to crack. But his smile didn't touch his eyes. It looked forced and tight. I asked if everything was okay, and he just shrugged, changed the subject immediately, and started talking about something random like movies. I nodded along, but my ears were ringing, my hands were cold. My brain was suddenly switching into survival mode, even though he was sitting right across from me, smiling like nothing was wrong. He kept trying to distract me by asking more questions, but he wasn't fully present. His eyes kept flicking toward the windows, not in a shy way, in a checking way, like someone was supposed to arrive. I excused myself to use the bathroom, acting as calm as possible. I walked past him slowly, pretending to check my hair in the reflection of the window so he wouldn't suspect anything. The second the bathroom door shut, I locked it and pulled out my phone. I didn't even think. I just called the police. I explained everything fast. The group chat name, the live location, the fact that I didn't know who he was really with. They told me to stay exactly where I was and not leave the building. An officer asked which restaurant I was in, how many exits there were, whether I could see outside. I told them about the huge glass front windows and the car park right outside. They said units were already close. That sentence alone almost made me cry. When I stepped out of the bathroom, I acted normal, even though my heart was pounding like crazy. He smiled when he saw me, but there was something in that smile I hadn't noticed earlier. It looked expectant, like he was waiting for a signal. I forced myself to sit down and pretend everything was the same. I kept checking the door reflection in my water glass. Every second felt longer than the whole date. He kept talking about random things but wasn't paying attention to the words he was saying. His eyes kept drifting to the entrance. Then it happened. The door opened and police officers walked in. Calm, direct, no hesitation. He froze instantly. Not shocked, caught. Two officers approached our table while another two headed outside toward the car park. One of them said my name and told me to stand up slowly and step aside. He didn't take his eyes off me as I moved. His face went blank, like someone had unplugged him. The officers grabbed him before he could move. He didn't fight. He just sat there stiff while they searched him. They pulled his phone out of his coat. The screen lit up again. The same group chat. Pick up. New messages. We're here. Which one is she? Is that her in the red jacket? I wanted to be sick. One officer rushed back inside from outside and said they had 3 men detained behind the row of parked cars. They'd been waiting in a black van with the engine running. They found duct tape, gloves, and a phone mounted on the dashboard following a map, the map showing my live location. My dot. Moving. Updating. The officer told me the men were part of a group known for targeting women through dates. They'd get someone to meet the girl, share her location, and wait for the right moment to pick up whoever the dot belonged to. They'd lure her outside to a darker area or toward a car, then the rest would jump in and help. They'd been doing it for months. They were trying to do it to me. The guy I was eating with wasn't the leader. He wasn't even the planner. He was just the link, the one who sat across from the target while the others waited for the signal. The dropped phone wasn't an accident. He'd been checking if they were close. When the officers pulled him outside, he didn't look scared. He looked annoyed. Annoyed that the plan fell apart. Annoyed that I ruined something he'd done before. They took him out through the front while the rest of the restaurant just stared. Some people were whispering. Some just froze with half-eaten fries. The officer walked me to the back exit so I wouldn't have to see the van again. I could still hear voices outside, shouting, car doors slamming, radios buzzing. My legs felt like they were barely holding me up. When I finally stepped outside, the air felt colder than before. Too quiet. Too open. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just kept thinking about that group chat title. Pick up. Like I wasn't a person, just something to collect. I swear this one still sticks with me worse than any other date I've ever been on. And the craziest part is that I didn't even get bad vibes from her at first. It wasn't one of those nights where you instantly notice something wrong. It felt normal enough. It felt like a night that should have ended with me going home, eating leftovers, and maybe texting her if things went well. Nothing about it hinted at what was actually going on behind her front door. We met on a dating app, nothing unusual. She looked normal, talked normal, and even the way she suggested meeting up didn't feel weird. She picked this chilled cafe near the high street. We sat outside under those heaters that looked like alien lamps, and honestly, it was decent. She talked a lot, but I didn't mind because she was actually interesting. She had this fast way of speaking like her brain was always 10 steps ahead. Every time I asked something, she answered before I finished the sentence. The only unusual part was how quickly she wanted the day to continue somewhere else. The moment we were done with our drinks, she leaned in and said she really wanted to show me her flat. Not in a flirty way, more like she wanted to prove something. I tried to laugh it off, saying it was late and I lived pretty far, but she got weirdly insistent. Not desperate, just overly eager. She kept saying it wouldn't take long and that her flat was only a few streets away. I should have said no, I know that now, but she seemed harmless. Tiny, soft-spoken, kind of awkward. The way she kept pushing it almost felt like she just didn't want the night to end, so I agreed. Her building wasn't awful, but it definitely wasn't the kind of place you brag about. Old bricks, busted intercom, lights flickering in the hallway. We climbed to the second floor, and she walked fast, like she knew the stairs by heart. Her flat was the last one at the end of the corridor. She opened the door quick, almost blocking my view of the inside at first, then stepped aside like she was revealing some secret project. The living room looked normal enough, a bit messy, a bit cramped, but nothing alarming. A small sofa, some weird posters, random equipment on the floor that looked like ring lights and cables. I thought maybe she did streaming or something. But the second I stepped in, I heard something. Not loud. Not obvious. Just a faint scratching sound coming from down the hall. I ignored it at first because I assumed she had a pet. I even asked her if she had a cat, and she said no in this weird quick voice like she didn't even think about the question. She guided me to the sofa, sat close, and kept talking about how she had been working on a project for months. She never said what the project was, though. She kept referring to it like I already knew. Then I heard it again. Scratching. Then a dull thump. Then silence. It was coming from a closed door on the right side of the hallway. The door wasn't normal. It had a heavy lock on it. Not a bedroom lock. A bolt lock. Thick, silver, too strong for a random flat. My stomach tightened. She noticed me looking. Her voice immediately sharpened. She said that room was off limits. No explanation, no humor, no attempt to make it sound casual, just off limits. I laughed awkwardly and pretended I didn't care, but inside my brain started racing. Why would someone have a locked, reinforced door in a small flat? And why would something be moving inside? She tried to distract me by talking even faster, asking questions, changing topics every 2 seconds. But her eyes kept drifting toward the door, too, like she was making sure it stayed shut. The scratching came again. Louder this time. Then something hit the door. I jumped slightly, and she immediately stood up, locking the hallway with her body. She said sometimes the pipes make noises, but pipes don't scratch. Pipes don't move. Panic started building slowly in my chest. I kept thinking of a way to leave without making it obvious, but she was standing too close to the front door. Then everything happened at once. Loud banging echoed from the hallway outside. Real banging, not from the room, from the front door of her flat. She flinched so hard she dropped her phone. I stood up because I had no idea what was happening. Before she could reach the door, someone shouted her name from the hallway, telling her to open up. Police. Actual police. She froze completely. Then she bolted toward the hallway like she wanted to block the door, but it was too late. They forced it open in seconds. 3 officers rushed inside, shouting for her to back up. Another 2 came in behind them. Everything became chaos. She screamed at them to leave. She kept yelling that they didn't understand, but they ignored her and went straight down the hallway to the locked door. One officer told me to stay where I was and not move, but my legs were shaking so bad I could barely follow that command. They broke the lock. It didn't take long. The moment the door swung open, the scratching sound turned into something else. A muffled cry. A man. Inside the room was a guy around my age, sitting on the floor, pale, weak, surrounded by lights and cameras pointed directly at him. There were notebooks everywhere with scribbles, questions, printed sheets. The whole room looked like some twisted interview setup. One officer rushed in and pulled him out while another cut something off his wrists. She screamed louder, trying to run to the room, but they grabbed her and pinned her to the wall. She kept yelling that she needed him for the channel, that the interviews weren't finished, that he was supposed to help her get famous. My entire body froze in fear. They explained it later. Neighbors had reported screams coming from her flat for days. When they checked her online activity, they found a creepy channel full of staged interviews with terrified people she tricked into coming over. Most ran out before things got serious. One didn't. The guy in the room had been missing for days. She wasn't jumpy because she liked me. She was jumpy because she knew the police were closing in and she didn't know if she had time for another interview. They arrested her right there. She didn't fight anymore. Her whole face felt blank like she was done pretending. The officers walked me out safely, but I felt like my body wasn't even mine. Everything I saw kept replaying in loops. The scratching, the door, her smile at the cave, the way she rushed me into the flat, a heavy lock, the guy inside. I got home and couldn't even sit down. I just stood in the kitchen staring at my hands like they weren't real. One more step, one more minute, one wrong question, and I would have been in that locked room instead of him. I knew something was off before we even sat down, and honestly, it still freaks me out how fast everything spiraled. It wasn't one of those horror dates where the vibe goes bad slowly. This one snapped from normal to terrifying so quick that my brain is still catching up. We met on a dating app like everyone else these days. He seemed normal enough. Decent pictures, decent messages, no weird energy. He suggested a restaurant I'd never been to but had heard people talk about. One of those places that pretends to be fancy, but is actually just dim lighting and overpriced pasta. I agreed because it was public, bright, and loud enough that nothing strange could really happen. At least that's what I thought. The second I walked up to the entrance, the evening already felt slightly off. He was waiting outside, staring hard at the glass door like he was watching for someone inside. When he read me, he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He wasn't rude, just tense, like he was thinking about a million things at once. I brushed it off. First date nerves happen. We walked in together, and the host smiled and asked for a name on the reservation. Before I even answered, the guy I was meeting jumped slightly. Not in a dramatic way, more like someone slapped the back of his mind. His shoulder twitched, and he looked away quickly. I said the reservation name I used when booking earlier that day. A host checked the list, nodded, and said we were right on time. But the guy beside me wasn't relaxed at all. He kept glancing around the lobby like he expected someone else to walk in behind us. My stomach tightened a bit, but I tried not to overthink it. We followed the host to a booth. The restaurant wasn't full, but there were enough people around that I felt safe. I sat down, but he didn't sit right away. He scanned the room again and only sat after making sure our booth wasn't near any windows. At the time, I thought he was looking for a good seat, but the way his eyes darted, too precise, too sharp, felt more like he was checking exits. The weirdness didn't stop there. He barely touched the menu. His knee bounced nonstop. His eyes flicked to the entrance every few seconds. When I tried to make conversation, he answered, but way too quickly. Short answers. Not relaxed at all. He wasn't looking at me. He was listening for something. I finally asked if he was okay. He said he was fine, but the word came out too fast and too flat, like it didn't belong to him. A few minutes later, two waiters walked past our booth at the same time, and he tensed so hard he dropped his fork. And when the host walked by checking tables, he lowered his head like he didn't want to be seen. That's when my brain started connecting things. His reaction at the entrance. His scanning. His twitchiness. The way he acted like the restaurant wasn't safe instead of just being anxious. The whole thing felt like he was hiding, not nervous. When he excused himself to go to the bathroom, I finally pulled out my phone and checked the reservation confirmation. My name was there. The booking was correct. Everything matched. But his reaction earlier didn't make sense. Not unless he wasn't expecting me to give that name. When he came back, he looked pale, sweating slightly, like he just had the worst phone call of his life. He didn't even sit down properly. He kept looking at the entrance again like something bad was about to happen. Then it happened. The front door of the restaurant opened, and 3 police officers walked straight inside. No yelling. No rushing. Just scanning the room like they were checking for someone specific. The guy across from me froze completely. Not blink frozen. Body frozen. Like someone hit pause on him. My heart dropped straight into my stomach. One of the officers pointed at our booth almost immediately like they had a picture in their head already. They walked toward us, and before I could even form words, 2 officers grabbed him from both sides and pulled him out of the booth. He didn't fight. He didn't talk. He didn't even breathe loudly. He just stared at me with this expression that didn't even look human. The whole restaurant went silent. People stared. The workers froze. An officer turned to me and asked me to confirm my name. I said yes, confused and terrified. He nodded, then said something that made my whole brain blank out. The man I was on a date with wasn't using his real identity. He wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't even the person who made the reservation. He used my name, to hide under. Someone with the same reservation name as mine was wanted for multiple charges involving fraud and break-ins in different cities. They'd been tracking digital reservations because the suspect often used restaurant bookings as meeting points. When they tracked the reservation under my name, they found out someone else had been using it. Someone who'd been slipping through tracking for months. He'd hijacked my booking. Matched with me online randomly. Used the reservation as if he was me. When I gave my real name at the entrance, he wasn't flinching because he was surprised. He was flinching because he realized he used the identity of the person standing right next to him, and the police were already closing in. The officers cuffed him and dragged him outside as he kept his head down. Not once did he try to deny anything. He looked defeated, like he knew he'd been caught the moment I said my name at the door. After they took him away, one officer stayed behind to ask how I met him, if I knew anything about him, and he asked me to pay for anything or share personal info. I told them he hadn't, and they said that was the only lucky part. They let me leave after that, but walking out of the restaurant felt like walking out of someone else's nightmare. I couldn't shake the image of him flinching at my name like he realized I had accidentally exposed him without knowing it. I got in my car and just sat there, staring at my reservation confirmation email, my name, my time, my table. He used all of it to hide. I swear this one still messes with my head because the whole night felt like two different realities happening at the same time. I went to the date thinking it'd be one of those awkward but fine evenings where you chat, eat, pretend you liked more than you did, then go home and tell your friends you tried. Nothing dramatic. Nothing worth telling a story about. We met at this small grill place near the edge of town, the kind with buzzing lights and chairs that don't match any of the tables. I picked it because it wasn't packed, and she said she liked quiet places. I got there early and sat in one of those cracked booths that smells like old fries. She walked in 5 minutes later, looking around like she was expecting someone to jump out at her. Her eyes kept darting from table to table before she even spotted me. She looked jumpy from the moment she sat down. Not nervous in a cute way. More like she read something scary and hadn't recovered yet. She kept touching her hair, adjusting her sleeves, looking over her shoulder every few minutes. I tried to lighten the mood, tell her a dumb story, ask about her day, but every time I talked, she flinched like her brain was somewhere else completely. She wasn't rude, though. She answered everything I asked, but her eyes never settled. She kept glancing at the window, at the door, even at the kitchen entrance. I tried to tell myself she might have just had a long week, or maybe she gets anxious meeting new people. But the longer I sat there, the stranger it felt. About halfway through the meal, she dropped her fork. Not by accident. She just froze mid-sentence and let it fall like she forgot she was holding it. When I asked if she was okay, she smiled way too fast and said she was fine. But her leg kept bouncing against the booth, and she was barely eating. The whole date felt off. Not in a dramatic way, but in this quiet, steady way that made my mind keep asking questions I couldn't answer. At one point, she checked her phone so quickly that she nearly knocked her drink over. I thought maybe your friend texted her something serious, but when I asked, she just said it was nothing and put her phone face down like she didn't want me seeing the screen. I didn't want to make her uncomfortable, so I just kept things calm and didn't push anything. When the bill came, she said she parked in the back car park, which is basically this long, dim lot behind the restaurant with faded numbered spaces and one flickering streetlight. I offered to walk her there because it looked creepy even from inside. She hesitated again, just for a second, then said okay. We stepped out, and the cold air hit instantly. She crossed her arms and walked quick, like she wanted to get out of there. As we walked past the dumpsters and cracked pavement, I noticed she kept glancing at her car like she expected something to be wrong with it. The closer we got, the stranger her whole energy became. She slowed down. Her breathing changed. It was like she was preparing herself for something she already knew might be there. Her car was this small silver hatchback, covered in a thin layer of fog from the cold. The windows were misted except for a small patch in the back where the condensation looked wiped away. I didn't think anything of it at first. Cars fogged up all the time. But then I saw something move. Not reflection, not my imagination. Something shifted behind the fogged rear window. A slow, steady movement. too controlled to be random. I stopped walking. She stopped too, but didn't look at me. She looked at the ground like she already knew what I saw. Then I saw it again. A shape. A silhouette. Not big, but definitely a person. The fog on the glass rose and fell slightly like someone was breathing inside the car. I took a step back without meaning to. She still didn't look at me. Her hands were shaking. Before I could say anything, 2 police cars cut into the car park from the side entrance. No sirens, just lights flashing across the pavement. They parked fast, like they were already expecting us. 4 officers jumped out and moved straight toward us. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She just quietly said I'm sorry under her breath, like she'd been holding it in all night. One officer grabbed her arm gently but firmly. The others went straight to the car. They knocked on the rear window once. No response. Then they opened the door. Someone was inside. They dragged him out like he'd been waiting to bolt. A skinny guy wearing all black with a hood pulled low and a small camera strapped to his chest. The lens was still recording, little red dot blinking. He kept muttering something while the officers pinned him to the ground, but I couldn't hear any of it. They held him down and ripped the camera off his hoodie. I kept staring because my brain wasn't processing any of it. Her date, her car, some guy hiding in the back recording everything. One officer asked me if I knew him. I shook my head immediately. Another officer asked her the same thing. She froze for a second and then said yes in this tired voice like she couldn't lie anymore. Turns out she wasn't jumpy because of me. She was jumpy because she knew he was in the back of her car the whole time. The officers explained everything after they separated us. She had been involved in this weird setup where they filmed dates secretly, trying to create some twisted reaction footage to sell online. The guy in the back would record every moment, collecting clips of the date, the walk, the reactions, everything. Sometimes they'd even try to stage confrontations to make the videos more dramatic. She wasn't good at it, though. That's why she looked terrified the whole night. She wasn't cut out for whatever they were forcing her into. And that small patch on the fogged window. That was where the hidden guy kept wiping the glass to see us better. When the police finally cuffed him and put both of them in separate cars, I just stood there staring at the fogged window. My reflection looked warped in it. I kept thinking about how close I came to walking her all the way to that door, and how the guy inside was waiting, watching, listening. I went home that night and didn't talk to anyone for hours. The date wasn't just bad. It was like walking into someone else's nightmare without knowing it. We matched on this random dating app that I only downloaded because my friends kept telling me to be social and stop staying home every weekend. He wasn't even my usual type, but he seemed normal enough. He messaged like a regular guy, nothing creepy, nothing strange, just the usual small talk. When he suggested grabbing a drink, I didn't think much of it. I just thought whatever, one drink won't ruin my whole night. He told me to meet him at this bar I had never read about, not even once. I Googled it before leaving and barely found anything except a few blurry pictures and one old review that didn't even say much. But he said it was quiet and laid back and not too crowded, which honestly sounded better than loud places where you can't even hear yourself. So I went. The bar was tucked between 2 shops on a street I'd never go down. The sign was half lit, flickering like no one bothered fixing it. But the place didn't look completely horrible. Just old. Dim. The kind of place where the lights are always a bit too low for no reason. I walked in, and he was already at a table in the corner, smiling like he'd been waiting ages even though I wasn't late. The first 20 minutes were fine. He wasn't awkward or rude or anything like that. He talked a lot, but some guys do that when they're nervous. I kept telling myself not to judge too quickly because sometimes you just need time to warm up. I ordered a drink, he ordered water, and we tried to make conversation. But it didn't take long before the weirdness started. Every time I'd excuse myself, even just stretch my legs or check my makeup in the bathroom mirror, he got up too. Not slowly, not politely, instantly, like he was scared to let me out of his sight. The first time it happened, I laughed it off and told him I'd be right back, but he followed anyway. He didn't go into the bathroom, obviously, but he waited outside the door like some security guard. When I came out, he was standing there pretending to look at the wall art. It happened again the second time, and the third. Every time I moved, he moved. If I got up to get napkins, he stood up behind me. If I said I needed air, he followed me to the doorway. He didn't touch me or grab me, but the way he hovered made my skin crawl. His eyes didn't blink enough. He watched me like he was studying something. When we sat back down, he stopped talking as much. He just stared. His fingers tapped on the table in this slow rhythm that didn't match the music. He kept asking if I was enjoying myself. Not in a casual way, more like he wanted a specific answer. The air felt heavy, like something wasn't lining up with what he expected. The final straw was when I told him I was going to message my friend that I arrived safe. It was a normal thing to say. Instead, he leaned forward and asked who I was telling, what I was saying, and if I needed to tell anyone that I was leaving soon. His questions were too tight, too rehearsed. At that point, my stomach felt tight, and I knew I needed to leave but couldn't just walk out the door with him 5 steps behind me. So I told him I needed the bathroom again. He smiled this forced smile and said, of course. Then he followed me like always. I walked past him straight to the bar instead of going to the bathroom, because I knew if I kept pretending everything was fine, something worse would happen. I leaned over the counter and quietly told the bartender I needed help. I didn't even explain why. I just said I needed help and that he wouldn't stop following me. I didn't know what reaction I expected, but the bartender's face changed instantly. He didn't ask questions. He just nodded once and said, stay here. He walked into the back room, and for a moment I panicked thinking maybe he wouldn't come back or maybe he thought I was exaggerating. Meanwhile, the guy stood behind me too close, pretending he was just waiting patiently. I could see his reflection in the glass bottles. He wasn't looking around. He wasn't distracted. He was staring directly at me. 2 minutes later, the back door of the bar opened and 3 police officers walked in. Quietly. No sirens. No shouting. Just walked straight towards him like they already knew exactly who he was. One of them asked him to step aside, and when he tried to act confused, they told him to put his hands where they could see them. He froze completely. Not shocked. Not scared. Just still, like he'd been caught earlier than he planned. They searched him right there beside the bar. I expected maybe a wallet or keys. But no, they pulled out zip ties from every pocket of his coat. Not 1 or 2. A handful. Thick ones. Rolled up tight like he prepared them deliberately. The bartender didn't move from behind me. He kept his arms slightly out as if blocking the guy's view. One officer told me to stay where I was while the others cuffed him and dragged him outside. He didn't say a word. Didn't protest. Didn't question anything. He just kept looking at me like he was trying to memorize my face on the way out. Once he was outside, an officer asked me if I came with him willingly. I said yes at first because technically I did, but then I explained everything. The following. The staring. The way he shadowed every move I made. The officer listened without interrupting and told me something that made my blood drain from my face. They had been tracking him because he'd approached other women in the past month with the exact same behavior, always at quiet bars, always choosing places out of the way where people wouldn't notice if someone left with him. He carried zip ties every time. They didn't know exactly what he planned to do with them, but none of it pointed to anything harmless. I read that part twice in my head after they said it. Zip ties. Every time. Following women. Waiting outside bathrooms. Picking isolated bars. When the police finally let me leave, I walked out the back door with the bartender because I didn't want to go near the front where they put him in the car. My legs felt weak like they could give up at any second. I didn't even want to go straight home. I just needed space. I deleted the app as soon as I got outside. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped my phone. When I finally got home, I sat on my bed thinking about how close I was to getting into a car with him if he had offered, or walking down some quiet street beside him, or letting him convince me to leave the bar earlier. All because I didn't want to sound rude by saying no. It started as one of those last-minute plans you agree to because you're bored and don't feel like going straight home after work. I wasn't even trying to impress anyone. I just wanted something to do that wasn't scrolling until I fell asleep. We met at this small diner near my workplace, the kind that's open late and always smells like fries no matter what time you walk in. It wasn't fancy or romantic or anything. Just a decent place where you can sit without loud music or weird lighting. She turned up wearing this big hoodie with the sleeves covering half her hands, and she acted shy at first, but not in a weird way. More like someone trying to get comfortable around a new person. At least, that's what I thought. The date felt pretty normal at the start. We talked about random things like movies, places we want to travel to, the usual filler stuff. It didn't feel forced. She laughed at my jokes, even the ones that weren't funny, which honestly made me feel a bit more confident. I was thinking the date might actually go somewhere, or at least end on a decent note. Then she started asking questions about my job. Not normal questions. Not like what I do day to day or if I like my coworkers. These questions were weird. Super specific. She asked how big the staff area was. How many entrances were on the ground floor? Whether the alarm system beeped when anyone opened a door. She even asked where deliveries come in and if there were cameras there. I tried to play it off at first, telling myself she was just curious or maybe she worked in something similar. But she kept going. She wanted to know if anyone stayed late after closing. How many managers had keys? Which side of the building connected to the back road? Stuff that even my coworkers don't care about. When I told her I didn't really pay attention to the layout, she kept pushing, asking me to try and remember. She'd tilt her head like she was fascinated, then pull out her phone and type things down. Not a lot, just notes here and there. It made me feel like I was being interviewed for something I didn't sign up for. She asked about the cameras next. Not what they looked like, but where exactly they pointed. I laughed it off and said something dumb like I don't spend my time staring at cameras. She didn't even smile. She just looked disappointed for a second before moving on to another question. By that point, my brain was sending me warning signals, but I still couldn't put it together. She didn't look dangerous. She didn't even look confident. She kept twirling her hair and tapping her thumb on the table like she was nervous about something completely unrelated. The date dragged on longer than it should have because she kept looping the questions back to my workplace. Every few minutes she asked something slightly more detailed, almost like she was checking if I'd slip up and give her more information. She asked me to explain the layout again, but with landmarks. Then she asked if the building was easy to get lost in. She even asked if the outside lights stayed on all night. I kept dodging her questions because at that point I was genuinely confused. I didn't want to accuse her of anything, but I also didn't want to keep giving her details about a place that stores expensive equipment out back. When the bill came, I was so ready to leave. She suddenly got super friendly again, like she wanted to smooth out the strangeness. She said she'd had fun and asked me to walk her outside because she didn't like standing alone in the dark. The diner sits on this long road with barely any lighting except for the sign flickering above the door, so I didn't think much of it. But the second we stepped outside, everything changed so fast my brain couldn't keep up. There were police cars parked right across the street. Not with sirens or anything, just sitting there in a way that didn't look random. Two officers stepped out before I even processed what was happening. One of them called her name, her real name, not the one she gave me. She froze instantly. Not scared, not confused, just caught. Before I could ask what was going on, they grabbed her arms and pulled her aside. She didn't fight. She didn't scream. She just sighed like she'd been expecting this. I stood there with my hands halfway in my pockets because I genuinely didn't know what I was meant to do. One of the officers told me they needed to ask a few questions. They explained that she'd been working with a burglary gang that targets businesses by scouting them through dating apps. They'd match with people who work in places with expensive equipment or weak security. Then they'd send someone like her to get the details. Everything about the building. Every exit. Every blind spot. Every routine. She wasn't just curious. She was mapping out my workplace. They said they'd been tracking her for a while and monitoring her messages in real time. She had been texting someone under the table the entire date, sending them notes about the structure, entry points, and times people leave. The police intercepted the messages before the gang could use them. They asked me if I gave her anything useful. I told them I didn't think so, but my voice cracked halfway through because I honestly couldn't remember how much I'd said. They reassured me they stepped in before anything progressed too far. They arrested her right there while the street stayed weirdly quiet except for the diner sign buzzing overhead. She didn't look at me once as they put her in the car. She just stared ahead like she was already planning her next move somewhere else. When they finally let me go, I walked home replaying every second of the date, trying to figure out how someone could sit across from me smiling and laughing while trying to plan ways for strangers to break into my job. The craziest part is that if the police weren't watching her, my workplace could have been hit that same night. I would turn up the next morning pretending everything was normal, not knowing I helped someone plan the whole thing. I deleted the app the moment I got home. I sat in my bed in silence for ages, thinking about how close I came to being part of something I didn't even understand until it was over. I keep thinking about how normal the whole night started And that's what messes with me the most. Nothing about the date felt dangerous or weird. It was just low-effort small talk in a place that didn't even have proper lighting. We met at this random pub my friend recommended because it had cheap food and barely anyone goes there on weekdays. I wasn't even planning to stay long. I just wanted to get out of the house for once instead of scrolling until I passed out. He showed up looking exactly like his pictures, which honestly surprised me because half the guys on these apps look nothing like what they upload. He had this laid-back energy, but not in a creepy way. Just calm, quiet, not trying too hard. I kept thinking maybe it would be one of those dates where you vibe, but nothing really happens after. We ate, talked about random stuff, and the night went by quicker than I expected. When we stepped outside, the weather had dropped like 10 degrees. The air hit me hard, and I immediately regretted not bringing a jacket. He noticed and asked if I wanted a lift home. It wasn't a long journey, maybe 20 minutes, but the buses were messed up that night, and I didn't feel like waiting around in the cold. I hesitated for a second, but nothing about him had set off alarms yet. His energy stayed calm the whole time. So I said, yeah, cool. He didn't drive a normal car, though. It was a small white van parked near the end of the street. The kind that looks like someone uses it for work or deliveries. It wasn't dirty inside, just cluttered. A few jackets, some boxes, water bottles, random stuff on the floor. He apologized for the mess and laughed about how he always forgets to clean it. I didn't care. I just wanted to warm up. Even when I sat inside, nothing felt off. The van smelled faintly like pine air freshener, and the heater blasted warm air almost instantly. He drove pretty smoothly too. No speeding, no weird turns, nothing strange. We talked a bit more, mostly about dumb things like favorite films, and everything still felt normal. I actually thought the night would be one of those decent dates I'd read about and for the next week. The first weird moment came out of nowhere. We were waiting at a red light when I thought I saw something move in the back of the van. Not a big movement, just a quick shift, like someone repositioning themselves. I turned around instantly, but the van was dark behind the seats, and I couldn't make anything out. I told myself it was just his jacket falling or something. Then it happened again. A sharper movement, like knees shuffling. My chest tightened. I stared at the gap between the seats for way too long. He didn't notice because he was busy talking about some story from work. The light turned green, and the van rolled forward, but I couldn't stop looking back. The shadows looked too still, too structured. I could see the outline of what looked like a shoe sticking out behind a box. I sat completely still, trying to keep my breathing calm like maybe I was overthinking everything. Then the shoe moved, not slowly, not gently. It jerked like someone trying to pull at a foot back. I snapped my head forward instantly because panic hit me so fast I didn't want him to notice. I kept replaying everything in my mind. Why would someone else be in the back of his van? Why didn't he mention anything? Why was the person hiding? I tried to look at his face without being obvious. He still looked calm. Too calm. He didn't check his mirrors nervously or fiddle with anything. But something about his eyes looked focused now. He wasn't zoning out anymore. He was paying attention to the road like every single turn mattered. We got closer to my area and the roads became narrower. Hardly any cars. Hardly any people. That's when flashing blue lights suddenly lit up the inside of the van. A police car rolled up behind us, sirens silent but lights blazing. At first I thought they were just trying to get past, but they didn't. They stayed directly behind us. He didn't pull over right away. He kept driving for a few seconds like he was pretending not to see them. When he finally stopped, he kept his hands stiff on the wheel. I sat frozen because I still didn't understand what was going on. 2 officers stepped up on either side of the van. They tapped on the windows with this firm urgency that made my stomach twist. He rolled his window down and they told him to switch the engine off. One of them looked at me and told me to unlock my door slowly. The tone wasn't gentle. It wasn't normal. It sounded like they already knew something. They told him to step out first. He tried to talk his way around it, but they kept repeating the order. When he finally got out, they patted him down and kept him by the police car. Then one officer told me to stay still. Another walked around to the back of the van. I could hear the latch being unlocked. There was a pause. A heavy one. Then shouting, loud shouting. Orders. Movement. More officers suddenly appeared from another car. They dragged 2 men out of the back of the van, both of them trying to cover their faces. I saw the inside when the door opened wider. Cameras. Not little ones. professional ones, battery packs, tape, zip restraints, a folded tripod, sweatshirts, masks. The officers pulled everything out piece by piece while the two men were pinned to the ground. One of the officers asked me if I had known they were there. I said no so fast my voice cracked. Another officer explained they had been tracking this guy for a while. They'd read reports of women being lured into vans and filmed without knowing. Not just filmed. They'd been planning staged abductions to post online for money. Fake victims. Fake scenarios. They were waiting for the right person who looked scared enough. Someone who wouldn't know what was going on until it was too late. I felt sick when I realized I almost became one of them. If the police had waited even 5 more minutes, we would have reached a completely empty road near the industrial part of town. The kind of place where no one drives at night. The place he told me was a shortcut. Everything after that felt blurry. He let me sit in the police car because I couldn't even stand properly. The guy kept shouting that he didn't do anything wrong. The two hidden men said nothing. They just sat there staring at the ground like they'd been caught doing something normal. They eventually let me go home after taking my details. I didn't say much. I couldn't. The whole walk back to my street, my legs felt numb. The idea of getting into a van again makes me sick. I deleted the app, blocked him, locked everything. And I still think about that moment when I saw the shoe move. If I hadn't turned around, if the police hadn't pulled us over, if those men had waited until the road emptied. I'm honestly embarrassed when I think about how normal this whole thing looked in the beginning. I wasn't expecting anything crazy. I just wanted a quiet dinner where I didn't feel awkward or bored out of my mind. I picked this small Italian place near the station because it wasn't too busy, and you could actually hear yourself think there. I was early, which never happens with me, so I sat outside for a bit pretending to scroll, even though my signal was terrible. I kept thinking this date would be one of those forgettable ones where nothing dramatic happens, and you barely remember their face a few days later. She showed up kind of rushed, like she had jogged from the bus stop. Her hair was slightly messy, not in a bad way, just enough to look real. She smiled super wide when she saw me, almost too relieved. I thought maybe she had a rough day. We sat down, and the vibe was awkward, but not the worst. She asked the normal first date stuff, but kept glancing at her phone every couple minutes. I noticed her screen brightness was on max, which made the whole restaurant glow off her face. I didn't say anything because I don't like being that person who calls stuff out too early. The weird part started when she kept telling me to talk louder. At first I thought maybe there was something wrong with the restaurant speakers or maybe she had trouble hearing. But it was so random. I wasn't whispering. The restaurant wasn't loud. Every time I said something, she'd lean forward with this intense stare like she was trying to catch every word, then look down at her phone and start typing really fast. I tried to ignore it because maybe she had some emergency going on. I didn't want to assume anything. But she wasn't panicking or anything. She wasn't stressed. She had this focused, calm expression, like she was multitasking in a way she'd done 100 times before. She asked a question about my job, then stared at the phone. Then she told me to say it again louder, then type more. She kept adjusting the phone under the table too, like she was hiding the angle of it from anyone around us. I thought maybe she was recording notes for an assignment or something strange like that. Still weird, but not alarming. What really threw me off was when she didn't even look up when the waiter came. She just waved him away while typing. I ordered both our drinks because she wasn't paying attention. She finally snapped out of it for a second and said sorry, but even then she glanced back down before finishing her sentence. The whole time she had this tiny earpiece tucked behind her hair, so small I didn't notice until she brushed her hair back. It looked like one of those cheap wireless ones. She saw me notice it and quickly covered her ear like she was scratching it. I tried to play it cool. I wasn't about to cause drama in a place where the loudest sound was the coffee grinder. I just told her I needed to go to the bathroom, mostly because I wanted a minute away from whatever was happening. When I stood up, she looked at me with this quick panic that didn't match the rest of her vibe. She said okay, but she immediately looked down at her phone again and started tapping fast like she was catching up on something she'd missed. On my way to the bathroom, I kept replaying everything in my head. Why was she typing so much? Why did she want me to talk louder? Why did she look stressed only when I stepped away from the table? I washed my hands while staring at myself in the mirror like I was overthinking everything. I figured maybe she was talking to a friend about the date, which is annoying but not threatening. I just wanted the night to finish so I could go home and live my life normally again. The second I stepped out of the bathroom, the entire restaurant changed. Chairs scraped. People gasped. A group of police officers rushed straight past me and stormed toward our table. I froze, literally stuck between moving forward or stepping back. They didn't hesitate. They grabbed her out of her chair so fast her phone slammed to the ground. Drink spilled. Someone started shouting for the manager. She didn't even resist. She kept yelling at them that they were ruining everything. One officer snatched the tiny earpiece from her hair. Another picked up her phone and turned the screen to me for a second. I saw my name, my job, my answers, typed word for word. But it wasn't a notes app. It was a chat window. A group chat. The messages were labeled with timestamps. Under each message, there were replies from people I didn't know asking for more details, telling her what to ask next. An officer asked me to step away and not interfere. One of the managers started asking what was happening, but the officers ignored him while they cuffed her. They kept her phone angled away from customers, but I still glimpsed some of the messages. Stuff like use his answers now, get him to repeat the income part, speak clearer, slow down, she can't hear him. They led her out of the restaurant and she was still shouting that she didn't do anything wrong. One officer stayed behind with me and explained everything in this calm voice like he'd said it 1,000 times already. He said she was part of a group running a scam call center overseas. They needed real voices and real conversations to mimic accents, tones, and personal stories so their workers could sound legit on calls. They'd been recruiting people to go on dates and secretly transcribe everything the other person said so they could use the lines during scam calls. That was why she wanted me to talk louder. That was why she kept checking the phone. She wasn't talking to some friend. She was feeding my entire personality into a chat full of people who were copying it in real time. Apparently, someone had tipped them off earlier in the day about her location, and they'd been tracing the live messages coming from her account. When they saw my name typed in the chat, they searched her device and matched it to profiles she targeted. That's when they decided to move in before she slipped out. They took her outside, leaving everyone staring at me like I knew her. I didn't know what to say. I sat back down at the table because my legs felt weak, and the waiter came over slowly to ask if I still wanted my drink. I said no, I just needed to get home. I walked out without finishing anything. The whole night felt like something I'd hallucinated. I kept thinking about how close I was to letting her keep collecting my answers. How she kept telling me to speak louder like I was some script she wasn't hearing clearly enough. The worst part was realizing that half the things I'd said weren't even important. Random stories, stuff about my job, stuff about my family. But they wanted everything. Every detail. Every word. And she sat there copying each one without even blinking. When I finally got home, I blocked her, deleted the app, and sat in silence. I kept imagining people miles away reading my words out loud to strangers on scam calls, using my tone, my stories, my life. I'm not even sure why I said yes to him in the first place. The whole thing started on this random dating app I barely use, and he wasn't even my usual type. He just looked normal enough, and I was bored that week. I kept telling myself I needed to get out more, meet people, stop spending every night scrolling and pretending I wasn't tired of everything. So when he suggested meeting in the city after work, I didn't even think twice. I just said, yeah, cool, whatever. I didn't expect anything special. I thought it would be one of those dates where you grab a quick drink, realize there's no spark, and go home early. It wasn't like that at all. From the second I met him, he had this weird chilled vibe that almost felt too chilled. Not relaxed, but more like he rehearsed being relaxed. His smile stayed a little too long. His eyes flicked around like he was checking things off a list. But he wasn't rude or anything, and I wasn't getting any scary vibes yet, so I tried to just go with it. We walked around the area for a bit, and every time I suggested grabbing food or even sitting somewhere, he brushed it off. He said there was something he wanted to show me first. He wouldn't even say what it was. He kept calling it this secret rooftop view like it was some rare hidden thing only he knew about. Normally, I would just said no because the idea of going somewhere random with someone I literally met 30 minutes ago isn't exactly smart, but he kept saying it like it was harmless. I didn't want to look like I was overthinking everything, so I just went with him. The building wasn't even that tall. It was one of those old mixed-use blocks where the bottom looks like shops from the 90s and the top looks like a place people pretend they don't live in anymore. The entrance he took me through wasn't the main one either. It was a side door next to a bakery that had been closed for ages. The first red flag should have been the stairs. They weren't lit properly. The lights flickered like they had no energy left. He kept walking ahead of me, not even noticing if I was behind him. He just said we were almost there, even though we were only on like the third floor, then the fourth, then the fifth. My legs were tired, and I was sweating through my shirt because the air in that stairwell felt thick and old. I asked him how many floors there were, and he said not many. That wasn't an answer. When we finally reached a metal door at the top, he stopped and looked back at me with this excited face like he was about to show me something magical. He pulled the door open, and the smell of warm city air rushed in. I stepped outside expecting some nice skyline. Instead, I stepped onto a rooftop that looked like it belonged in the middle of some run-down industrial zone. There were AC units everywhere. Weird cables. Boxes that didn't look like they should be there. I thought he was joking about the view. But then I saw the tripods. 3 of them. Set up behind the AC units like someone tried to hide them but didn't bother to hide them properly. They weren't tiny phone tripods. These were the big ones you see in filming setups. One of them had a little red light blinking like it was charging or something. That was when something in my chest tightened. He acted like he didn't notice them at all and just walked straight to the edge, telling me to hurry before the lights of the city changed. I stayed near the door because everything suddenly felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. The whole rooftop had this eerie quiet. No wind, no city noise from below. Just this buzzing sound coming from somewhere behind the units. Then I spotted something small on the ground near my foot. Tape. Long pieces of cloth. It wasn't random trash. It looked like someone had been using them for something. My brain started trying to piece things together, but it just made me more uneasy. He finally turned around and noticed I wasn't following him. He lifted his hand slightly like he wanted me to step forward. That was when I heard the buzzing shift. It lifted. I looked up and saw a drone rising behind us. It came up slow like someone was guiding it from somewhere close, and I swear the second it came into view, he got this expression that didn't fit his face, like a switch had been flipped. He didn't look excited anymore. He looked focused. Cold. I stepped back until my shoulders hit the metal door. I kept wishing someone else would come onto the roof, even though I knew they wouldn't. He took a step toward me, and I swear I almost pushed the door open and ran. Then, out of nowhere, the entire building shook with this loud, booming echo. Not an explosion, more like someone slammed the door downstairs with full power. Then voices. Heavy footsteps. People shouting. I didn't understand what they were saying, but they were coming up fast. The guy jerked his head toward the door like he didn't expect that. The drone kept hovering above us, pointing straight at me. I felt like I couldn't breathe properly. The door behind me burst open before I could even move. Police flooded the roof. Actual armed officers. They yelled at him to get on the ground. They moved me aside like I wasn't even part of this. He didn't fight them. He just crouched down with his hands out, and I swear he looked annoyed more than scared. One of them told me I was safe and asked how long I'd been with him. I told him less than an hour. Another officer said they'd been tracking this guy for weeks because he'd been staging fake hostage videos with dates he brought up to rooftops or empty buildings. He would record them looking scared and try to get viral clips out of it. Some of the girls had reported him, but he kept slipping away before they caught him. They took him down the stairs while the drone slowly lowered itself onto one of the tripods like it was following some script. They kept telling me I didn't need to worry, but I couldn't stop staring at the cloth on the floor or imagining what would have happened if they came even 10 minutes later. I left the building without looking back. I didn't even delete the app until I got home. I just sat there in silence for the longest time, trying to understand how someone could turn something as simple as a date into that.